All right, we'll go ahead and do our Orange Day reading tonight. One of the reasons that Mr. Peck and I decided to add a reading on Orange Day is just because it's so easy to get into doing things and not thinking about them and not taking every opportunity we have to learn about them and to remind the children, remind ourselves. So we just want to make use of that time. The Lord has graciously granted us this time, so that's why we're going to go through it. The first thing I'm going to do is go through just a very brief history of the battle, which gives a little context about why we do Orange Day. And then I'm going to read something called Romanism and the Reformation. So we'll go ahead and get started. The Battle of Boyne Summary. In the wake of the glorious revolution of 1688, the deposed Catholic King James II sought to regain the thrones of England and Scotland. Arriving in Ireland, he took command of the 25,000-man Jacobite army and began planning his next move. Included in his army were 6,000 French soldiers who had been sent by King Louis XIV to aid the Jacobite cause. Alerted to James's action, Protestant King William began assembling forces to drive his adversary from Ireland. Apologize in advance for all the names I might slaughter tonight. Landing at Carrickfergus in June 1690, with 16,000 men, William quickly lined up with the Duke of Schomberg, who led a force of 20,000. With this combined army, William began moving south towards Dublin. Rather than oppose William's march in the rough country around Newry, James assumed a defensive position along the south bank of the River Boyne, approximately 30 miles north of Dublin. On July 11th, William and his men arrived at the Boyne and began scouting the Jacobite positions. While doing so, William was slightly wounded by enemy artillery fire. One thing noted when I was doing a little reading on this is that they noted that William was one of the last kings who actually would go out and lead his forces into battle. And that's how he got wounded. He was out scouting positions and fighting some artillery. Making camp at a village, William devised a plan which called for a sweeping flanking maneuver to the west, while he pinned the Jacobites in place near the fords at Oldsbridge. The victory at Boyne cost William approximately 750 killed and wounded, while the Jacobites suffered around 1,500. Continuing his march, William entered Dublin 2 days later. Fearing that his cause was lost, James departed the army and retreated. From there, he embarked for France, never to return to the British Isles. His army was ultimately besieged, and he was forced to surrender the following year. The triumph at the Boyne marked the first major victory for the League of Augsburg over the forces of Louis XIV and his allies. In Ireland, the Boyne marked the turning point of the war and assured British and Protestant dominance over the country for the next 2 centuries. For this reason, the battle has assumed significant importance within the country. And so for us, obviously we remember it, he was William of Orange, and he was Protestant and gave them a lot of freedom from persecution for a long time after that, by God's grace and his sovereignty. And so we're wearing orange. Amen. And so in remembering all these things, it's a good time also to think about the Catholic Church, to think about Antichrist, to remember that this foe is still around, even though much quieter, at least as far as we're concerned, because it's not directly persecuting us. But it's good to remember who they are, what they do, and what the reformers spoke of them. So what I'm going to read is called Romanism and the Reformation. It's by H. Grattan Guinness. It was written in 1881, and he did a series of lectures, and this is lecture number 7. And it's titled Interpretation and Use of These Prophecies in Post-Reformation Times. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's long, so I just got out some snippets that I thought would highlight it. 3 centuries have rolled by since the accomplishment of the glorious Reformation. These centuries have a double aspect, a Protestant and a papal. On the one hand, they present the spectacle of an era of liberty and light, and on the other hand, of reaction and revolution. In the history of Protestantism, these centuries have been an era of liberty, civil and religious. In 1500, there was not a free nation in Europe. All were subject to the tyrannical government of Rome. Now half Europe and America are free from that intolerable yoke. In the year 1500, there was hardly a Protestant to be found in the world. Rome had exterminated them all by prolonged and cruel persecution. And the last 3 centuries have been an era of light. At their commencement, the human mind experienced an emancipation and was furnished with new instruments. Learning was revived, and the art of printing discovered. Since then, the Word of God has been multiplied, translated, and expounded as never before, and the understanding of prophecy has shared this general advance. During this time, libraries have been written on the prophetic scriptures. Mighty interpreters have been raised up, men such as Meade, Sir Isaac Newton, Eliot, whose investigations have drawn back the veil of long-continued ignorance and let in new light upon some of the darkest obscurities of the theme. Interpreters have risen in groups like constellations of stars, and knowledge has increased. On the other hand, post-Reformation times have been times of papal reaction and revolution. In the first place, the Protestant Reformation was encountered by a tremendous papal reaction. The rising wave of life and liberty was met by a counterwave of resistance. Hardly was the ship of a Protestant church set free and launched upon the deep than there arose a mighty tempest. The resurrection of the slain witnesses of Christ in the person of the reformers was answered by a resurrection of all the powers of the pit. The awakening of men's souls brought war, ecclesiastical and civil, a war of anathemas, and a war of extermination. Swords flashed forth, flames were kindled. Rome rose in its anger and its might, and did wondrously. She thundered excommunications. She slaughtered millions. Not without an awful struggle would the Prince of Darkness give up his kingdom. No, look to it, ye brave reformers. You will need the armory of heaven and its help, for all the hosts of hell are roused against you. You may conquer, but it shall be through strife and anguish and seas of blood. Draw up your confessions of faith, ye blessed restorers of a pure gospel. Dare to give them to the world if ye will, but ye shall be stoutly answered. Against your confession of Augsburg, Rome shall erect her Council of Trent. She shall formulate her canons and decrees. She shall impose her creed of Pius IV, and utter her chorus of anathemas. I just looked up the definition of anathemas in the 1828 dictionary, and there's basically excommunication with a curse. So, rise up, O Luther, cry out concerning the Babylonian captivity of the church. Burn the papal bull, rouse Germany, but you shall have your match. Satan shall bring forth his Loyola, and Loyola his Jesuits, subtle, learned, saintly in garb and name, protean in form, infinite in disguises, innumerable, scholars, teachers, theologians, confessors of princes, politicians, instruments keen, unscrupulous, double-edged, men fitted to every sphere and every enterprise. They shall swarm against the church of the Reformation, each one wise in the wisdom and strong in the strength which are not from above, but from beneath. Rise up, Zwingle, thou lion of Zurich. Lead forth thy brave Swiss against the enemies of liberty and truth, but ye must perish on the field of battle ere your cause succeed. Ride forth, fair flower of France. Strive, ye brave Huguenots, for your country's freedom and the faith of the gospel. But Paris shall run with your blood. Ye shall fall like leaves from a tree shaken by tempest. Ye shall lie in heaps like rubbish in the streets. Your bodies shall choke the streams. They shall rot in the rivers. They shall hang in chains. They shall be shoveled into cemeteries, or buried in dung heaps. Rome shall ring her joy, and sing her songs of praise, and fill her cathedrals and palaces with acclamations, because the massacre of St. Bartholomew has overthrown for a time the work of the Reformation in France. Stand up, ye Hollanders. Stand up, William the Silent. Stand up, ye men of Haarlem and Rotterdam, of Amsterdam and Leyden. Ye brave burghers, which is an older word, which I think meant citizens when I looked it up, but I could be wrong. And earnest theologians, ye dare to contend for civil liberty and sacred truth. Your land shall groan beneath the tread of Alva's troops. Your fortresses shall fall. Your citizens shall be thrust through with Spanish swords. Your possessions shall be plundered. Your wives and your daughters shall be dishonored and foully murdered. Your children trampled beneath horse hooves and trodden down like mire in the streets. Break thy chains, O England. Rome shall find means to rivet them again. Thou shalt have the Bloody Mary in thy fires of Smithfield. Protestant bishops shall burn for it. Against thy secret isle, Spain shall send her proud armada. A fleet of 130 great ships of war shall come across the seas. 12 of them, named after the 12 apostles. They shall be laden with seamen and troops, with swords and guns, with priests and Jesuits. The Pope shall bless the banners. Woe to thee, O England, if heaven help thee not, if its winds forsake thy cause. Combine yourselves together, ye Protestant states of Germany. Claim your rights of conscience. Stand for the truth. Establish your Protestant liberties, but you shall have your desolating war of 30 years. From Bohemia to the broad waters of the Scheldt, from the banks of the Po to the shores of the Baltic, whole countries shall be devastated, harvests destroyed, cities and villages reduced to ruins. Half Europe shall be set on fire, and civilization shall be buried for a season in bloodshed and barbarism. The apostate church commands the sword of Latin Christendom. The harlot rides the beast, and the beast has claws and great iron teeth, and sharp, strong horns, and inhuman ferocity. She sits proudly upon it, and it obeys her, grasping, rending, and crushing whom she will. But what if the beast should grow weary of carrying her? What if the beast should take a dislike to her usurping ways? What if it should resist her, and cast her off, and turn its power against her, and serve her as she had served others? Ah, that would be a different story, but not an experience unforetold. John foresaw it would be thus 18 centuries ago, and history has fulfilled his predictions. For Romish reaction was followed by democratic revolution. 1572 was followed by 1793. The massacre of St. Bartholomew was by the Reign of Terror. France Papal crushed France Protestant, and was crushed in its turn by France Infidel. Have you not heard of Voltaire, of Rousseau, of Robespierre, of Danton, of the execution of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, of the massacres in Paris in 1793, of the guillotine, wholesale drownings, of how the river Loire was choked. How's it? Loire. Yeah. Was choked with corpses. Of the war in Levendy, of the worship of the goddess of reason, turning cathedrals into stables, of the 40,000 churches, chapels, and oratories torn down by the revolutionists, of the massacre and banishment of priests and Jesuits, of the burning of palaces, the beggaring of princes, the overthrow of monarchy and government and aristocracy and corrupt religion, as by the heavings of a social earthquake or the outburstings of an irresistible volcano. Have you not heard of how the infidel democracy rose in its might, struck down the powers which had deceived and oppressed it, confiscated all the vast revenues of the church, the domains of the crown, the estates of the nobles, slaughtered 1,022,000 persons of all ranks and ages and both sexes, till the streets of Paris ran with blood, and the guillotines could not overtake their work? And have you not heard how a little later on the papal states were conquered by Napoleon and converted into a Roman republic? How the papacy was extinguished, the Vatican plundered, ecclesiastical property confiscated, and the Pope dragged from the altar and sent as a prisoner to die in exile? Are not these matters of history, and of recent history? Here is theirs, History of the French Revolution. Oh, that's probably the guy's name. That was a typo. Here's Dyer's. Yeah, that's actually his name. History of the French Revolution. Here's Allison's history of that revolution in 12 volumes. And here's Carlyle's History of the Same, written as with a pen of fire. It is but a century since these things were accomplished, and the afterwaves of that mighty revolution are still rolling. These two great movements, which have followed the Reformation, the papal reaction of the 16th and 17th centuries, and the revolution of the 18th century, have mightily helped to open men's eyes to the true character of Romanism, and to the fulfillment of the prophetic scriptures. The last 3 centuries have consequently witnessed a great advance in the comprehension of prophecy, and we are this evening to study the expositions which have resulted. First, note the fact that Rome's reply to the Reformation in the 16th century included an answer to the prophetic teachings of the Reformers. Through the Jesuits Ribera and Bellarmine, Rome put forth her futurist interpretation of prophecy. Ribera was a Jesuit priest. In 1585, he published a commentary on the Apocalypse, denying the application of the prophecies concerning Antichrist to the existing Church of Rome. He was followed by Cardinal Bellarmine, a nephew of Pope Marcellus II, who was born in Tuscany in 1542 and died in Rome in 1621. Bellarmine was not only a man of great learning, but the most powerful controversialist in defense of popery that the Roman Church ever produced. Clement VIII used these remarkable words on his nomination: "We choose him because the Church of God does not possess its equal in learning." Bellarmine, like Ribera, advocated the futurist interpretation of prophecy. He taught that Antichrist would be one particular man, that he would be a Jew, that he would be preceded by the reappearance of the literal Enoch and Elijah, that he would rebuild the Jewish temple at Jerusalem, compel circumcision, abolish the Christian sacraments, abolish every other form of religion, would manifestly and avowedly deny Christ, would assume to be Christ, and would be received by the Jews as their Messiah. would pretend to be God, would make a literal image speak, would feign himself dead and rise again, and would conquer the whole world, Christian, Mohammedan, and heathen. And all this in the space of 3.5 years. He insisted that the prophecies of Daniel, Paul, and John, with reference to the Antichrist, had no application whatever to the papal power. The futurist writings of Ribera and Bellamy were ably answered by Brightman, of whose work on the Apocalypse, published about the year 1600, this is a copy. And they have been answered since this time in a succession of learned works, which I cannot stop to enumerate, for I desire to dwell upon another, and as I regard it, a more important phase of prophetic interpretation, marking the last centuries, a phase not of a negative, but of a positive character. Protestant interpreters have done more than answer the false futurism of the Church of Rome. They have built up the true historic interpretation of prophecy. They have built up a solid and symmetrical system, a system which has developed slowly, which has progressed constantly, which has been born not of diligent investigation only, but of profound experience. A system whose truth has been sealed and demonstrated by its ever-growing correspondence with the actual course of events. True theology, like true science, is slow in development. The well-known prophetic student, Robert Fleming, lived at the time of Vitringa. How do you pronounce that? Do you know how to pronounce that? Anybody?
Say it again.
Vitringa?
Yeah, that's right.
And Dabuz? No, I just don't
Dubois?
know. Yeah, probably. He published in the year 1701 a small but remarkable work, of which this is a copy, entitled The Rise and Fall of Rome Papal. Its theme is the relation of papal and prophetic chronology. Fleming shows, as others had done for many centuries, that the 1260 days of prophecy represent 1260 years, and advocates their interpretation upon the intermediate or calendar scale, which would shorten the whole period by 18 years. Reckoning from the most important days in the rise of the papacy, and guided by the prophetic times, Fleming indicated 2 years, then future, which would be marked in all probability by crises in the overflow of the papal power, the years 1794 and 1848. He also mentions 1866. Now it should be remembered that Fleming published this work in 1701, and that the French Revolution fell out at the first of the dates, which indicated the reign of terror took place, as you will remember, in 1793. And that the year 1848 brought another tremendous crisis in papal history, the revolution that broke out in Paris on February 23rd, and before March 5th, every country lying between the Atlantic and Vistula had in a greater or lesser degree been revolutionized. On March 15th, a fortnight after the fall of Louis Philip, a constitution was proclaimed at Rome, and the Pope fled, and was subsequently formally deposed from his temporal authority, and an Italian republic proclaimed. The year 1866 was equally or even more important, as introducing the series of papal defeats, which culminated 4 years later, in 1870, in the overthrow of the papal monarchy in France, and the fall of the papal temporal power in Italy. Is it not a proof that this historical expositor Fleming was working on right lines, and had seized the true clue, that he should have fixed, nearly a century beforehand, on the close of the 18th century, as the commencement of the era of divine vengeance on the papal power, and have pointed out, within a single year, the very central period of that signal judgment, and that he should have indicated other years, 1848 and 1866, as years of papal overthrow, saying, with reference to the former, "We are not to imagine that this vial will totally destroy the papacy, though it will exceedingly weaken it, for we find it still being alive when the next vial is poured out." The vial which succeeds he interprets as the judgment on the Mohammedan power, especially as existing in Turkey. And by the vial which follows that again, the seventh vial, he understands the final destruction of Rome or mystical Babylon. He says, "As Christ concluded his sufferings on the cross with this voice, 'It is finished,' so the church's sufferings are concluded with a voice out of the temple of heaven, and from the throne of God and Christ there, saying, 'It is done.' And therefore with this doth the blessed millennium of Christ's spiritual reign on earth begin." And now in conclusion, we have traced in these last 3 lectures the antiquity, the practical use, and the systematic development of the historical interpretation of prophecy. And I cut out, he went through he goes through Isaac Newton, he goes through it, so I had to cut out some stuff. But since he mentioned France, I thought I'd take a snippet on Fleming. We have shown that the historical interpretation was the earliest adopted in the Christian church, that it developed with the course of history, that it sustained the church through the long central ages of apostasy, that it gave birth to the Reformation, that it has since, confirmed by the events of several centuries, and elaborated and defended by an unbroken series of learned and unanswerable works. In vain do the waves of controversy rage against this stately rock. It has stood for ages, and is destined to remain till the light of eternity shall break upon the scene. The historic interpretation is no dream of ignorant enthusiasts. It is no speculation of fanciful, ill-balanced minds. It has grown with the growth of generations. It has been built up by the labors of men of many nations and ages. It has been embodied in solemn confessions of the Protestant Church. It forms a leading element in the testimony of martyrs and reformers. Like the prophets of old, these holy men bore a double testimony, a testimony for the truth of God, and a testimony against the apostasy of his professing people. The providential position which they occupied, the work they accomplished, gave singular and special importance to their testimony. And this was their testimony, and nothing less, that papal Rome is the Babylon of prophecy, drunken with the blood of saints and martyrs, and that its head, the Roman pontiff, is the predicted man of sin, or Antichrist. To reject this testimony of God's providential witnesses on a matter of such fundamental import, and to prefer it to the counter-doctrine advocated by the apostate persecuting Church of Rome, is the error and guilt of modern futurism. And that futurism is self-condemned. Futurism is literalism, and literalism in the interpretation of symbols is a denial of their symbolic character. It is an abuse and degradation of the prophetic word, and a destruction of its influence. It substitutes the imaginary for the real, the grotesque and monstrous for the sober and reasonable. It quenches the precious light which has guided the saints for ages, and kindles a wild, delusive marsh fire in its place. It obscures the wisdom of divine prophecy. It denies the true character of the days in which we live. And while it asserts the nearness of the advent of Christ and the power and glory of his kingdom, it at the same time destroys the only substantial foundation for the assertion, which is prophetic chronology, and the stage now reached in the fulfillment of the predictions of the apostasy. But in spite of the injurious effects of these false interpretations, the foundation of God standeth sure. None can cancel the prophecies which he has written in his holy word, and none can deny or destroy the mighty and far-reaching results which their true interpretation has already accomplished in the world. It has given us, and this is its glory, it has given us the Reformation. It has broken the iron chains of superstition and despotism, and lifted nations from the depths of their abasement. It has reared a temple whose walls no enemy can ruin. It has reopened, it has given back to the world that book whose teachings have led millions into the way of life and peace. And the sacred light of these prophecies is still guiding the Church of God across the wide ocean of her dangerous way. Those steadfast stars of prophecy, which lighted of old the persecuted Waldenses through the darkness of the Middle Ages, which lighted the progress of the Lollards and the Bohemians before the Reformation, which lighted the noble reformers through gloom and tempest 300 years ago, and which have since lighted watchful saints through troubled centuries, are shining still in that high and holy firmament, whence no mortal hand can pluck them down, and they shall shine on those 1,000 glittering stars of prophecy. They have fulfilled their glorious mission, till they have guided the church in safety to her celestial haven, and their long-enduring radiance melts at last in the rising splendors of eternal day. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord.
Amen.